Welcome to the SEC Championship Wrap-Up from Read and Reaction. My name's Will Miles. You can find me on Twitter at WillMilesSEC or at my website, readandreaction.com. With me is Nick Knudsen. You can find Nick on Twitter at NickKnudsenFB, writing at Read and Reaction, or at his website, AmericanFootballStories.com. So, Nick, overall thoughts on the Gators going down 52-46 to Alabama in the SEC Championship game here?
Overall thoughts, second half was a ton of fun to watch. The first half, I was in a depression about the defense pretty much, just watching Bama do whatever they want, especially getting that last second touchdown in the first half when we could have killed a few seconds on the clock. I know it's nitpicky, but I think Gator Dave said it last week. You and Gator Dave were saying it last week. All the nitpicking is kind of coming to fruition, right? And we're kind of seeing all those concerns kind of pop up all at once, aren't we?
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where you think about coming into this game. I think we knew Florida needed to play a clean game, knew Florida needed to probably play a cleaner game than Alabama. And when you look at the tail of the tape, I mean, they had some opportunities, but you look at it, they had more turnovers, 2 turnovers to 1, the turnover that directly led to the field goal on the fumble by Trask. It seemed like every time they were about to get over that hump, they just weren't able to do it. And then obviously not being able to stop Najee Harris, as Alabama overall ran for 187 yards, 178 of those for Najee Harris. And when Florida pulled it to within a touchdown there with about 5 or 6 minutes left, they just handed the ball to Harris, went down the field, and then hit Devontae Smith on the one wide open slant with Marco Wilson on him 1-on-1.
Yeah, seemingly the only guy who Gary Danielson and why am I blanking?
Nestler.
Nestler. Yeah, Nestler and Danielson, the only guy that they didn't reference for the Heisman Trophy seemingly was the guy that looked like the absolute best player on the field today.
Well, yeah, it is interesting that, Devontae Smith obviously gets a lot of love, and deservedly so. Mac Jones ends up throwing for 418 yards on 43 attempts, so really, really efficient, certainly getting the ball to the guys he needed to in space. It didn't really look fantastic. It felt like Florida had an opportunity, and maybe they could have rattled him when Trey Dean got that interception, but then obviously turn it right back over on a play that I'm surprised they didn't review for targeting. That seems like one that should at least get a second look.
It 100% was targeting. I'm not sure, especially I feel like anytime someone gets a little rattled on the field, they automatically go to the booth in college football these days.
Well, they went to the booth on the one where he missed him earlier in the hat. The Alabama linebacker came up and was like 5 feet away from Trask's helmet, and they still went and reviewed it. So I was a little bit surprised they didn't review that one. So if we look at
good for little Alabama for catching a break, though. Good for those guys. They need a break like that.
I mean, they did call that one holding call on Leatherwood, which, Alabama getting called for holding is a pretty rare occurrence. But so you look at the Heisman numbers: 33 of 43, 418 yards, 5 touchdowns, and the 1 pick for Mac Jones. 26 of 40, 408 yards, 3 touchdowns for Trask. Though obviously then he had the rushing touchdown as well. So 4 for him on the night. You got Naquan Wright, 4 rushes for 11 yards. Emory Jones, the leading rusher, 2 carries for 24 yards. Kadarius Toney, the second leading rusher, 2 carries for 15 yards, 26 rushes for 54 yards overall. I mean, you talk about balance. That's where the difference in the game came. I mean, Trask and Jones basically had the same line, and Alabama wins by 6. And it turns out that it's that the 2 touchdowns rushing for Najee Harris and the 3 touchdowns receiving for Najee Harris.
Unbelievable game for Harris. I mean, 15 receptions for Devontae Smith too. Devontae Smith, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns for him too. So even though it felt like the Gators contained him for some parts of the game, still putting up quite a stat line there.
Yeah. So I guess the big storyline coming out of this one, at least for me, is twofold. The clock management at the end of the halves is something that I think we have to talk about when it comes to this one. So Florida comes down at the end of the first half, scores with like 1 minute and 15 seconds left, and they have an opportunity to maybe let the clock run out, or at least let the clock run down before they run Trask in, maybe give it back to them with 45 seconds. They had timeout, so it's not as though if they got stopped and the clock would run and they'd have to rush or anything like that. So, one of those things where Mullen just really didn't take the clock into account. Alabama gets the ball, 1 minute and 15, drives right down the field. I think I don't criticize it that much. If Alabama gets a field goal, you sit there and say, well, that stinks. But then they end up putting it in for a touchdown, going up 35-17 at the half. And, going down 17 at the half against Alabama. Florida made a gallant effort in the second half, but that was really, you start thinking about it. Florida really had to play from behind at that point.
Yeah, the thing that I was thinking before the half there with Mullen was this. It's just not in his DNA to think like that. He's going to score when he can score, right? That's typically how he plays. But I think when your defense played the type of first half it did, that has to enter your mind a little bit, right? Like if we give them the ball back, they're probably at least going to get a field goal with a minute left. The way that the defense was playing the first half, and it would have been nice to eat an extra 15 seconds there at the goal line.
Well, and I don't have any problem with him doing that and having that attitude if he had that attitude in the second half when he was coming down and scoring. But they were letting 10, 15, 20 seconds run off the clock in between plays on that last drive. It's a 10-play drive, took 2 minutes and 52 seconds, though they had a big pass interference call and a ball down the middle to Pitts. Then they had the 22-yard throw to Pitts in the corner where, maybe got away with a little bit of a shove. But, they finally decided to push the ball down the field, but they also wasted 2 timeouts on that drive. And I say wasted because, if you're going to let the clock run when you got 3 minutes, why don't you let the clock run when you got 2 minutes and 20 seconds? And then they wasted a second timeout on the decision to go for a 2-point conversion. At that point, I think you take the flag, go back 5 yards, kick the extra point and say, hey, if we're going to try to win this game, we try to win it with the 2-point conversion once we score the touchdown to get within 1, as opposed to kicking to tie it. I understand why you'd want to go for 2 if you're the underdog. Like, let's see if we can get the win. You can't burn a timeout there. You just can't.
Yeah. I going for 2 in that situation to me was a luxury in the first place. I didn't think it was necessary. You want to do it so you have the idea is to get 2 cracks at going for 2 in case you miss it, you can go for 2 again, right? Okay. I get that from like an analytics and from that standpoint, but to waste a timeout, wouldn't that timeout have been pretty valuable there on that last drive?
Absolutely.
Just beating Harris 3 times.
You mean when Trask got sacked with 23 seconds left instead of getting sacked with like a minute and 20 left?
Right.
Yeah, it might have been valuable. I mean, So at both junctures, at the end of the first half and the end of the second half, Florida's coaching failed them when it came to clock management. This is one of those things where you look at guys in the NFL like Andy Reid, who's a savant from an offensive perspective with Kansas City Chiefs, but just constantly makes clock errors all the time. And, at the end of the day, you got to have somebody over there helping you with that. You can't willy-nilly take a timeout when you're going for 2. There's no reason. There's zero marginal value for taking that timeout. The 2-point conversion, like you said, is a luxury, not a necessity. And so you take the penalty, you kick the extra point, you're down 7. But then I even want to go to the level of aggressiveness all night. I mean, by the time the first half ended, we were like, all right, defense can't stop them. And they got a couple of stops there in the third quarter, which allowed Florida to get back in the game. But even so, there was never – I'm a little bit disappointed that there wasn't any tricks. There wasn't a whole lot of creativity. Now, part of me says, okay, we lost to Alabama by 6 in a situation where man-to-man you sort of stood right up next to them. But I don't think this game was really as close as 6 points. Once Florida decided they were going to allow the clock to run a little bit on that last drive, Alabama loosened up, and then they hit the one big one to Pitts, and then the game's basically over on the onside kick.
I thought that the one positive from last week's LSU disaster would be that this would be a dangerous Dan Mullen tonight. I thought we'd see some onside kicks. I thought we'd see a couple of throwback passes. We've seen Kadarius Toney wing it a couple times. I thought we'd see a lot of that. I thought he pretty much they had a game plan in mind. Clearly, Kyle Trask running the ball was part of the game plan too, because we saw a lot of that. Like they clearly saw a look they liked up the middle on that. But it's something where if Mullen, I think, had to do it over again, maybe he goes in and takes a couple other shots. But I thought they were pretty aggressive in pushing the ball downfield, though. So maybe Mullen didn't feel like he needed it, because when your offense has put up 46 points, and I thought the offense was clicking most of the night, maybe you don't feel like you need it.
Maybe so. I mean, the thing that I look at, though, is there was one drive in particular. Alabama scores a touchdown to go up 21-10. Florida gets the ball back, 5 plays, 13 yards, but they got the ball back at the 32 because they had a nice return from Malik Davis. So they have it at the Florida 42, 3rd and 11, and they throw a little swing pass out to Kadarius Toney for 3 yards to the 45. And it's 4th and 8. I get it. You're at your own 45. I get it. But those are the kinds of times where you got to take a shot. I don't particularly like the swing pass out to Toney either, but if you're going to do that, if you're going to throw it right at the line of scrimmage and go, it's time to go for it on one of those 4th downs. And, the reality is Alabama took over on the next drive, 13 plays, 70 yards, 28-10. Florida then scores a touchdown on 4 plays, 75 yards, 28-17. And that's the one where then they give it back to Alabama. Alabama ran 8 plays in that minute and 3 seconds, coming back down to score a touchdown and go up 35-17. Really gallant effort by the Gators to make it a game in the second half, because I think we were all sitting there going, oh, this could get really ugly there in the second half. But again, I go back to, if Dan Mullen is going to bring in recruiting classes significantly worse than Alabama, he's going to have to outcoach Nick Saban. He's going to have to do things that are strategic, and he's going to have to be a little bit aggressive. And in this case, clock management, and he wasn't really all that aggressive when he had some opportunities to be aggressive. And I think that sort of bit him there.
Yeah, definitely. But I do think part of that was because the offense was clicking, but I think maybe not enough weight was given to just how bad the defense was playing. Like we talked about going for that fourth down. You go for the fourth down because you're probably going to surrender another drive on defense right now.
Well, I mean, it's a question of, are you going to give up 70 yards or are you going to give up 50, right? At that point.
You could even argue Alabama would have the ball for less time of possession if they're going to inevitably score anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting that you say that. So the defense got 2 stops coming out in the second half, gave up some yards, but got 2 stops. And actually, the defense had 2 stops in the first half. They just managed to screw them up. They had the illegal hands to the face on the 3rd down where Mac Jones was a little bit inaccurate. I think it was Stewart got the stop out there, was able to get in the way and at least get his hand in there to sort of make it a little bit of a difficult catch.
Right.
They get the stop.
Carter on Leatherwood, right?
Carter on Leatherwood, hands to the face. I mean, look, Leatherwood's a beast out there, and so sometimes you can get your hands up there. But again, when we're talking about threading the needle here, like Florida had to do to win this game, you can't have that. They had the offsides penalty on the opening drive that turned a 3rd and 10 into a 3rd and 5, and then Alabama was able to convert that by like a half a yard. And then obviously the big one, the interception by Trey Dean, a great play to pull it away. Actually reminded me of Ahmad Black back in 2008 against Oklahoma, sort of coming in and pulling the ball away. I mean, worst case scenario, you figure you're just going to get the ball back deep in your own territory, but instead, as he's running it back, gets ear-holed from the wide receiver Mechie coming back the other direction, fumbles that. Alabama takes it. 1 play later, Devontae Smith wide open on the crossing route. And, I mean, at that point, you're like, all right, is this just not our night?
Wild swing of emotions on that play. When I saw Dean, I mean, I jumped out on my chat. Since I've started writing about the Gators and everything, I've kind of become more relaxed as a fan watching the games. I was full on fan mode tonight. I jumped out when Trey Dean ripped that ball away, and he's running down the field, loses the football, and just devastation. And then the next play, Devontae Smith wide open, blown coverage. Tough break for the Gators on that one.
Yeah, we talked about Mullen's aggressiveness earlier, and the other place I think that maybe he failed in that regard is, so Florida comes out, scores a touchdown on the long throw to Grimes on the first play of the second half, or the first drive of the second half. Now it's 35-24. Then Alabama, they stop them, get a punt. Now Florida's got the ball back. And this is the drive that I think is going to drive most Gator fans nuts. It's 35-24. If you go down and make it 35-31, you start to make Alabama sweat a little bit. The first pass is incomplete to Kyle Pitts. Okay, that's fine. You get a defensive pass interference. So now you're almost at midfield. Then Trask is sacked for a loss of 3. So now you're sitting there 2nd and 13. And they have Kyle Trask run on a QB draw up the middle for 4 yards to make it 3rd and 9. On the next play, Trask gets pressured a little bit, is inaccurate on a throw to Malik Davis, who's open, but probably isn't going to get the first down. But now you're 4th and 9 at the Alabama 47. Again, you're at midfield. You figure flipping field position isn't going to be critical. It turns out Florida did force a punt on the next drive, comes down and scores a touchdown. But just think about how that changes things. If they go for it, score a touchdown, then force the punt from Alabama, all of a sudden you sort of got, I mean, they needed to make up 2 scores in that second half. And this was another one of those examples where you're sitting there at midfield. You'd like to be 3 or 4 yards further. You'd like it to be 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, but you got a Heisman Trophy level quarterback and a tight end who can't be covered. That was one of the ones where I'm like, all right, just not aggressive enough when you're the underdog. And for somebody who went for 2 points, down 7 or down 8, with a minute or 2 minutes left, like that's the kind of move you would expect, is to be aggressive on 4th downs.
Yeah, I don't think a common criticism of Dan Mullen after games is he wasn't aggressive enough either, too. So it's a little unusual to even be in this territory right now. But in that situation, I agree with you. I think that's something where you had to consider that you only have so many stops in the tank with this defense tonight. And to not take advantage of one of those stops, was definitely a critical point in the game.
Yeah, well, Dave Wonderlick over at Gator Country actually did write about Mullen not being aggressive enough this year, and wrote about how he needed to sort of throw that out the window. And I mentioned on that drive that there was a run for Trask, but clearly that was part of the game plan because Trask ran the ball 15 times for 0 yards. Now, obviously, sacks get built into those rushing yards, but that still means you figure if there were like 3 or 4 sacks where he lost like maybe 15 yards, it still means he had like 10 rushes for 15 yards. Not a real efficient play. Obviously, Emory Jones a lot more efficient at that. But what'd you think about all the Trask runs?
So in the first half, I couldn't understand it because it wasn't going anywhere. Especially, did they pull it out on a 3rd and long, the one where we settled for the field goal to make it 14-10, right? It was like 3rd and 9. He did that, and I was like, I thought he did it because clearly I thought he saw something because I know I wasn't like I definitely thought it was a read that they had because I'm like I know they're not calling a QB draw on 3rd and 9 with Kyle Trask hoping to get that first down, so I assumed Mullen was going to go for it. There's another situation. We tried out the field goal. It was about 4. What was that? 4th and 3?
4th and 5 at that point. Yeah.
Well, this offense, I think that's good enough where that could have been a situation where you maybe go for it too. I thought that's what they were doing, and instead they come out and they kick the field goal.
Yeah. The defense did show. I mean, they had 5 wide, and the defense did show there were 4 guys in the box, 5 guys blocking. Reese actually allowed his guy to sort of blow him up and got to Trask because otherwise I think he gets really close. And it's like, maybe a first down, maybe 4th and 1, 4th and 2. But again, if you're going to make that call, you got to go for it on 4th down. Like that's the whole point of making that call.
Right. And
especially when you got a guy who's going to throw for 400 yards.
But I thought in the second half, we saw that game plan. I was surprised when I saw the stat line when it said 0 yards, even with the sacks, because I thought that he used it fairly effectively in the second half, particularly like a couple of those later drives when you need about 3rd and 3 or something like that. Yeah, I feel like he had like about 3 or 4 of those runs were pretty critical.
I mean, it's a huge part of Dan Mullen's offense to have a quarterback who will run. In 2018, one of the things they did in the bowl game against Michigan was Felipe Franks drove Michigan crazy. Every time they spread him out, all of a sudden it was a 8, 9, 10-yard run up the middle. They did it a couple of times on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. That's something that he does. Trask obviously isn't the guy you normally want doing that, but it's part of the offense, right? And if they're going to take things away through the air, then you have to start doing that. I don't have a problem with him doing it. I have a problem with him not being prepared to go for it on 4th down after doing it. The whole point of running that play is the upside is at a bare minimum, you gain 4 yards and give yourself a manageable 4th down. At a positive, you catch him by surprise because nobody expects Trask to do it, and you get a first down. Again, I was confused at that. There were a couple other things. I thought they could have used Emory Jones a little bit more. I thought there were some opportunities, especially when they were struggling to run the ball. You bring him in, and one of the things I keep expecting them to run is fake the run with Emory and then have him throw over the top. See if you can get one of the receivers or one of the DBs to bite on a double move where the receiver fakes blocking and then goes out into the pattern. Regardless, you're going to get one-on-one coverage with a cover 0 because the team's coming up to stop Emory when he's running it, and they can't. He still gets 6 or 7 yards every rush. So that's one place that I was a little bit surprised that Florida didn't try to take advantage of.
Yeah, and Emory only had 2 carries, right? But yeah, that 17-yard run in the first half was that in the first drive?
Yeah, I mean, I think so.
He looked good a couple times. They let him touch the ball. He looked good tonight.
Yeah, so it was actually their field goal drive where he had the 17-yard run, and got him deep into territory, and then they sort of stalled a little bit.
Let me ask something. Kyle Trask. We're obviously talking about Trask in the Heisman race this year, so there hasn't been a lot of chatter around this. But Dan Mullen's offense, and we saw this with Urban Meyer too. It's really when you can't run the football with the quarterback, it's night and day. Ohio State had a situation like that with Dwayne Haskins a couple of years ago, where Haskins was a great quarterback, put up great numbers, but the running game, when you take that dimension out of the offense, it's night and day. I think you look at the 26 carries for 54 yards tonight, right? I think it's going to be a completely different offense next year with Emory Jones running the show, and I think
Well,
the rushing game is going to be a huge improvement next year
Well,
with this team.
it's going to be, but then we're going to be back to where we were 2 years ago, complaining about the reads and how things aren't going in the right place. Because let's be honest, I mean, Trask is a savant when it comes to figuring out where does he need to throw the ball, throwing it with anticipation. The touchdown pass to Tony was gorgeous. He threw a bunch of really nice balls right on people's hands. There was one down the sideline to Copeland that got through the DB's hands. I don't know how it did. Hit Copeland right in the bicep, and Copeland didn't catch it, but it was still a gorgeous pass down the sideline. Like, I think we take some things for granted from Trask because he's so reliable and so good at those sorts of things. And yes, there are things he does that are not as good, especially running the ball. And Emory Jones is going to bring that forward. But I hesitate to say that we're not going to miss Trask in a big way next year. You make a good point about Urban Meyer's offenses and Dan Mullen's offenses needing a running quarterback. Some of that is probably the scheme, that you need the quarterback to hold that defensive end coming around the back end. Otherwise you can't pop a big run because he's there if you try to cut back. So yeah, that's part of it. At the same time, they didn't run the ball last year either when Felipe Franks was the quarterback.
Well, I don't think he was a great runner either. He was a little more mobile than Trask, but he wasn't a great. We've certainly seen better runners in the system. But to your point of taking Trask for granted, how good he was, I couldn't believe he missed that throw to Shorter down the sideline. That's one of the few throws that we've seen him miss like that this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's funny. You see him miss one, and you're like, "Oh, they must have held him or something." Just like that.
Yeah.
That has to be, that has to be one of them. And the one that he missed was, was that on a punt, a drive where they punted it?
I want to say that was on the field goal drive.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so they got 3 points out of it, but
yeah.
Again, I think it's interesting when you get down, obviously, so it's Alabama's up 14-10 in the first quarter. You get the field goal. So that's why it's 14-10, but you're like, all right, we're sort of hanging with these guys, then put up 21-7 in the second quarter. And quite honestly, Florida's offense didn't really hold up its end of the bargain there in the second half. Part of that being the punt, part of that being the field goal. They did get a touchdown there, but obviously with a minute left allows Alabama to come right back down the field. But then the Gators 14-0 in the third quarter. So, had it to within 4 points there going into the fourth quarter, right? It was what, 35-31, I think, going into the fourth quarter. And then 17-15 Alabama in the fourth quarter. And really, I think the difference is you look at the running game. So, Alabama had 11 rushes for 33 yards in the second quarter, 4 rushes for 10 yards in the third quarter, but then 13 for 78 in the fourth quarter. They put the game away, right? They just stuck it. And I think this actually is the argument against Jones for Heisman, is that when Alabama needed a drive, they didn't say Mac Jones, go get his touchdown. They said Najee Harris, blow him off the ball. So the offensive line and Najee Harris came in and put the game away. And I think that's actually the argument against Mac Jones.
I just felt sorry for our secondary when Najee Harris got through the through the linebackers. He was unbelievable tonight. Our guys, even who is it that went low? Is it Elam? He leaped over pretty well. Elam was in position to make that play. He's in position to make the play. Maybe showed it a little early, but Harris can run through him, jump over him. Unbelievable effort from him tonight.
I'll tell you the one guy that I think is going to be a monster next year is Diabate. They made so Najee Harris got on Ventrell Miller 2 or 3 times in that first half, and they were able to throw it to him, and he was able to get first downs because Miller didn't even get out to make the tackle. Diabate, all of a sudden, I think they kind of switched him over to having those responsibilities out in the flats. I know he tackled the tight end there short one time, and a couple other times, and was really getting his head in there for the running plays, getting aggressively coming to the line of scrimmage. He's got a burst that none of those other linebackers have. I'm really looking forward to what he's going to do in the bowl game and what he's going to do next year, because I think he's finally starting to understand what he's supposed to do at that position, and his athleticism is going to take over. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do next year.
He seems like a guy that's just around the ball a lot on the defensive side. He's been one of the bright spots on the defense this year for sure.
Yeah, he had the tip pass in the first quarter that sort of set up a third down. So, I had a few keys to the game coming in. The first key was win the turnover battle, and they didn't. 2 turnovers for Florida, one for Alabama. So Alabama wins the turnover battle. The other thing was stop them on third down. Alabama 9 of 15 on third down. The Florida was 8 of 11. So not it was a wash when it comes down to it. But the other thing that I wanted them to do was throw the ball a ton and just abandon the run. They did in some respects,
Mhm.
but I think the Trask running sort of outdoes that. And then the other thing that they just refuse to do is they don't run Trask outside. Like, that
Can
little
you?
well, but they've got that little
I don't know if
option
that's
play.
possible.
But they've got that little option play that they run to the weak side. So when they're they'll
Yeah.
run it to the near hash side, and they sort of fake the fake, right? They fake the read option, and then the running back goes off for an option and Trask goes around the edge. They haven't tried that in like a month. And I'm sitting there going, actually, I don't think they've tried it in 2 months. And the fact that they refuse to run it, because Trask's longest run of the years on that play, they absolutely just gashed LSU a couple years ago on that play. And they're much better running the ball outside than they are running it inside, and yet they refuse to run it. It just completely flummoxes me.
I think that Trask best quality as a runner is his ability to fall forward and being 6'5" at the same time. That's probably why they don't go outside a whole lot with him.
Well, so I guess to wrap this up, where do we go from here? Right, Florida's 8-3, probably playing in the Cotton Bowl versus Oklahoma. That's what it seems like. A good season, right? I mean, you beat Georgia. You obviously dropped the game against LSU, which is disappointing, but you only lose by 6 points to a very good Alabama team, probably the team that's going to win the national championship. You lose to them by 6 points. Was it that close? Was it not? Doesn't matter, right? I mean, clearly, if you'd watched this game, the first game of the year, and these two teams had played, you would have said, wow, neither one of these teams can stop anybody. But they're both really explosive on defense. I'd love to watch that game again. That's actually where I'm at. I'd love to watch this game again. I know that wouldn't happen, but where do we go from here? Where does Florida go from here when it comes to moving to the bowl game and moving into to 2021?
Well, hell, if we didn't lose that LSU game last week, we might be able to sit there and try to scream our way into the playoff, because who's the fourth best team in college football right now? Did Notre Dame look awesome today? Are we really fired up to watch Texas A&M in there? I know they beat us, but we lost 2 games before this Alabama. We lost 2 games on the final play, like basically the final play of regulation almost on field goals, and then we lose by 6 points to Alabama. Although I'm with you, it's 6 points, right? Like, but they made Alabama sweat. Go look at Alabama's scores from this season. They haven't played within one possession of anyone. Alabama, the way you know you pushed Alabama tonight is when the clock expired, you saw Alabama players running across the field doing a gator chomp. And whenever they're doing the gator chomp, it means they care. It means they care, and it means they're having to beat every single. I don't know if our opponents know that every single opponent that beats us does that, and that's not an original move, but they do it anyway. So, but that means they're happy. That means it means something to beat us too. But I don't think they were doing that in 2015, 2016. This is a big leap for the program this year overall. The Georgia win is massive. And I know we were trading texts back and forth with, I mean, you look at like a program like Alabama and Georgia where they're recruiting comparable talent. And then Florida's not in that stratosphere on recruiting. And for Florida to leapfrog Georgia in year 3 of Dan Mullen, considering where they started when he took over, I mean, this is good progress this year. It's a bitter pill to swallow. We don't celebrate just getting to Atlanta with this program. But hey, Alabama, this is going to be the eventual second year in a row. I think you said this on a text with me earlier. Second year in a row, we play the national champs in a pretty solid performance, right? So progress.
Yeah, I mean, I think this year's progress, I think what keeps coming back to me is if I look at the 24/7 sports roster rankings, where they look at number of guys on each team, and they break it down into 4 stars, 5 stars, 3 stars, that sort of stuff. Alabama has 12 5 stars out of their 85 commits, 58 4 stars. Florida has 4 5 stars, 44 4 stars. So from the standpoint of just the talent gap, and granted, I mean, Alabama's ranked number 2 overall in talent behind Georgia, and Florida's ranked 7th this year. But a lot of that is due to transfers, right? A lot of that is due to some of the high level 5-star guys they brought in, like Brenton Cox, who quite honestly didn't get a whole lot of pressure tonight. But if you start looking at the list of guys who have turned out, you got Najee Harris is a 5-star, the 2nd-ranked guy on the team. Alex Leatherwood, a 5-star, the 3rd-ranked guy on the team. Patrick Surtain, a quarterback, 5-star, the 4th-ranked guy on the team. Dylan Moses is a 5-star. You got
Unbelievable.
Landon Dickerson is a high-level 4-star. Jalen Waddle, high-level 4-star. Tim Smith, Devontae Smith, high-level 4-stars. Like, all their starters, or a large portion of their starters. Josh Jobe, high-level 4-star, like ranked 95.1 on 24/7. So, like, you start going down the list of guys who are starting for Alabama, who are playing major minutes for Alabama, and they all sort of go from that top tier. You look at Florida, that's not the case. You look at Florida, obviously everybody thinks about Trask, but Kadarius Toney was a 3-star guy. He's playing major minutes out there. Kyle Pitts was a 4-star, not a high level 4-star, actually, when you start looking at it. Justin Shorter, though, is the 5-star. I mean, a contributor, but not a huge deal. Gravon Dexter, a freshman, so I don't know that you can expect a whole lot from him, or you shouldn't. But he's going to have to grow into somebody who's big. Brenton Cox played a ton of minutes, but wasn't really an impact player on the field. Lorenzo Lingard didn't play at all really this year. It's not until you get down to Trevon Grimes and Kyer Elam where you start looking at that. Now, I guess the good news is you've got Dexter, Shorter, Cox, Elam, Wingo, Xavier Henderson, Chris Bogle, before you start getting into the guys like Slayton, Copeland, Jahari Rogers, and Richard Garage. So the high-level talent for Florida that Mullen's been bringing in is not necessarily playing right now, and you would expect them to start playing a significantly larger role next year. But obviously, those guys who've really been contributing, who are further down on this list, are going to be going away. So we'll see. I mean, Florida has extended their gap, or extended their most teams have a dip in the second or in the third year of the coach's tenure. And this year's Florida team goes 8-3, going to play in a bowl game, maybe go 9-3, especially against a 10-game SEC slate when you play in the SEC championship game. That's a good path. So we'll see. But
best team under Mullen, right? Best team under Mullen so far.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the most unbalanced team under Mullen, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I suspect, and I haven't actually done this, I suspect if you look at point differential, they won't be. I suspect that if you look at, and that's the best way really to gauge whether a team's better. I think they've scored way more points this year, but they've also given up way more points this year. I bet you that if you look at point differential, they won't be the best team.
I think this team, it's definitely the progress is real, especially on the offensive side of the ball. You can just count on it week in week. It feels like the old Florida again for sure. But I was more positive on the front end of this. We got to do something with this defense here, man. And I know that's what most people are going to walk away from this game saying. And like I think the defensive side of the ball, it just feels like there's a lack of physicality up the middle, especially. I feel like we're easy to penetrate in the running game up the middle in particular. We got some talented players, but I'm not sure. I think we might need more beef and more size like Alabama has. I don't know. Like I see Dexter coming in. Dexter's going to be that guy, but you certainly see someone like Slayton make some plays every now and then. But I know we have talent there, but I'm not sure there's something where the consistency is lacking on a regular basis with that.
Yeah, I mean, they just don't have the same guys to rotate in, right? I mean, the strategy for Alabama was run the ball early and try to tire out Florida's defense. And by the time they got in the fourth quarter and needed Najee Harris to go down the field, that's exactly what happened, right? Like they had him tired out, and Florida wasn't able to stop them. It's a year of transition. I know the fan base wants Todd Grantham gone. I think the thing that really personifies it is the touchdown to Devontae Smith, where Marco Wilson's playing outside leverage when he's got no safety in the middle, and it's not even close. There were a couple other plays where the play at the end of the half where Steiner really just needs to wrap up Harris as he's going in, because if you take him down at the 2, they take a timeout, kick a field goal. Instead, you let him in because all you do is put a shoulder into him. He's able to spin out of it and goes in for the touchdown. Those sorts of things, I think, is what you're talking about from a physicality standpoint. Tonight was a little bit different because for the most part, it wasn't mental mistakes. It was that there was the play where Harris gets the ball out in the flat, does the spin move on, I think it was Jaden Hill, and gets in. That's one where I say, all right, Najee Harris is going to beat people one-on-one.
Harris is a freak too. We could add some quality in there for Harris being a freak, but again, we're not just happy to be there, right? We're figuring out how are we going to improve and we want to beat Alabama, right?
The issue is Grantham. The issue is Grantham. I mean, if you want to go back and look at when he was hired, I wrote an article that basically said, like he doesn't do anything to make recruiting uptick. He doesn't do anything to make defenses that much better than they were before. And if you look at his time at Mississippi State, so it was interesting. It's the only time Mullen's actually fired somebody. He fired Peter Sermon, I think was his name, was his defensive coordinator at Mississippi State. He fired him, hired Grantham. Grantham was at Louisville. So Louisville went and hired Sermon. So it was like a perfectly controlled science experiment. And what happened is that like the 2 years before, under Manny Diaz at Mississippi State, I think the Bulldogs defense was ranked like, I don't know, 23rd, 24th in yards per play. They dropped to like 70th or 80th with Peter Sermon. Then Grantham comes in, they go right back to 20th. So everybody sees the jump from 70th to 20th and goes, oh, Grantham did a great job. He just sort of brought him back to the baseline that Manny Diaz already had. And then you look at what happened when Sermon went to Louisville. Louisville was a good defense under Charlie Strong and Todd Grantham. And then Sermon takes over, and all of a sudden I think they were like around 20th under Grantham. And then they went from like 20th to 70th under Sermon. So all this really proves is that Sermon is a crappy defensive coordinator. And that Grantham making the defense improve that much at Mississippi State was more about the talent at Mississippi State and the poor coaching of Sermon than it was about Grantham. I don't think he's a terrible defensive coordinator. I think they're not real good at holding people accountable when mistakes are made. Right. I mean, the same mistakes we've seen the same mistakes we've seen year after year or week after week after week keep cropping up. But, here's the reality. It's $3.6 million to buy him out. I actually think they'll probably do it because I don't think that's a whole lot of money in the grand scheme of things when it comes to, when it comes to like Auburn and what they just had to pay to give up Malzahn. The only thing I would say is that it does give Mullen a scapegoat when if he keeps him on next year and the defense still doesn't improve, then it gives him the ability to sort of buy one more year if he thinks next year is going to be a little bit of a down year, because then you can get rid of Grantham after the offseason, and then that's the year that you're on the hot seat next.
How much of it is just college football today? Because I mean, even they're talking about Saban, a couple months ago, even said you need to have an offense to win. Like, I mean, even if we have a solid defensive coordinator, like that we're all happy with. I mean, not that Grantham, I'm not knocking Grantham on that. He's done fine in different areas, but like I'm saying, like, even if you have a defensive coordinator you're perfectly happy with, that's had a good season, you're still giving up 35 or 42 tonight, right?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, I don't think that it's the number of points that Florida gives up that drives people crazy. I think it's the lack of progress that's seen over the course of the season. And I think it's I think it's the mistakes that are made over and over and over again that even common people can see, right? People, I'll include myself in that, like people who maybe watch and try to understand, but don't necessarily know what the defensive calls are. But when you see both corners blitzing and the safeties both rotate over into the direction of one corner, that's a problem. And that has something to do with either the defensive coordinator made the wrong call or he hasn't taught his guys. He's not holding people responsible for that sort of stuff. Same thing. Marco Wilson makes the tackle, throws the shoe. All right, what's going on there? You got the play tonight where Kyrie Campbell couldn't get off the field, and they get to delay a game the 12-man on the field.
Yeah.
If nothing else, you have to teach Kyrie Campbell to get on the ground and fake being injured, because he was laboring to get off the field. But there are ways to avoid that penalty. And you just need to be prepared to do that. The substitutions, not being ready on fourth and a couple inches to stop that sort of thing on the QB sneak. There's just multiple times where Florida, all the defensive backs, you play really far off. The one that I think is really going to get to people, or should get to people, is the prevent defense that they played at the end of the first half tonight, rushing 3 guys. So they rushed 5 on the first play, and Alabama saw it coming and was running a screen pass to Najee Harris, and Mac Jones got a little bit nervous and made a bad throw. And then the next play, Grantham rushes 3, and they hit, I think, the tight end over the middle and just a huge hole in the zone. And if you're going to drop 8 guys, you can't have that kind of hole in the zone. I go back and just say, I think it's a system failure when your defense is giving up 30 points a game. That's a problem, especially when you've got an offense that can put up 40. You win a lot of games 40-30, but when you start playing against teams that are national championship quality, this is what happens. You lose 52-46.
Well, the offense is national championship quality, at least we know that.
Hey, I mean, I do want to
gotta feel a little good walking away from this.
Well, I mean, so I this season has been fun. And I think that's one of the things. I know if you're on Twitter, you wouldn't think that Florida's won a single game this year, but The team has won a bunch of games.
normal.
They lost 2 games by 3 points. They lost 1 game by 6 points. So every game has either been a blowout in Florida's favor or has been close. And the Gators lost all 3 one-score games this year. And Mullen was 7-1, or I think 6-1 coming into this year in one-score games. So, I think some of that is clock management. I think some of that is talent. I think some of that is a defense that can't get off the field. But the reality is that if Florida plays better in the second quarter tonight, if Florida doesn't fumble the ball against Texas A&M in the fourth quarter, and if Marco doesn't throw the shoe, this team's playing in the playoff, right? And in fact, I think if Marco doesn't throw the shoe and they don't fumble the ball against A&M, they're playing in the playoff anyway.
Yeah.
Right? I think a 52-46 loss to Alabama, if they both came into this game 10-0, and you're playing there. So it's one of those things where you look at the talent and you go, okay, we need to do better. At the same time, they're really close. And this is one of the reasons why recruiting is so frustrating, because you're like, if you could just bring in a top 3 class with a couple of impact linebackers and an impact defensive lineman, all of a sudden you'd get over the hump.
The conversations, the complaining this year is a lot more fun because you're complaining about catching Alabama. And you're complaining about not making a playoff. You're not complaining about how the hell did we lose to Missouri at home? What happened against South Carolina? You're not talking about that, which is what we've done over the past decade. So if the past decade hasn't given us perspective that we're not entitled, this isn't our birthright to be here every single year right now. You got to have a little perspective of how good things are going right now. And I think obviously you want to catch Bama. You want to win a national title. You want to win the SEC. You want to win a national title. But that's where those little things that seem nitpicky with the recruiting and everything, that's the gap right now. That's the little differences. And I feel like we can get there. We can get there.
At the same time, it's disappointing, right? I mean, you're
in the moment.
You're in the SEC championship game. Yeah. You don't get a lot of opportunities to win this chip. It's the 3rd straight time we've lost to Alabama in the SEC championship game. Obviously, I think things are heading up versus heading down, which is where we were sort of going after the second loss the SEC title game to Alabama. Mm-hmm. It may just be that Nick Saban is that good and that we're sort of waiting for him to retire. And when he does, then it'll be a Mullen Kirby Smart battle for the supremacy of the SEC. Maybe we can start that retirement a little bit early. So maybe we should root for Alabama to win one more title.
Don't count out Auburn's mystery hire.
Sure.
We got a mystery hire on the board at Auburn here.
I don't think Kevin Steele's going to be taking on Nick Saban anytime soon with any sort of regularity. But hey. I think one of the things I would like to say is that Florida was down 35-17 at the half. I think we all thought the game was over.
Good fight in the second half.
They got back to 4 points. I was proud of the team.
Yep.
After the Marco Wilson shoe throw, you sort of went to work. I know I saw one of the Gators breakdown listeners posted a picture of his house where all of his friends had pelted his house with shoes. I mean, that was a tough one at the water cooler. This is one where you walk in and you go, you know what? The giant of the SEC was standing there. You stood toe to toe with them. You hit him in the mouth. It wasn't good enough, but you know what? Florida was a 17-point underdog, lost by 6, had a shot if they get the onside kick at the end, had a shot if maybe they'd use their timeouts right. Didn't get the job done, and obviously that's all that matters. But I'm proud of the team for fighting back. I'm proud of the way they did it, and you always rep the logo on Sunday after a loss just because that's the way we are. But this one, I have no problem repping the logo tomorrow. In fact, talking about the game, being proud about it.
Yeah, definitely a strong finish. Nothing to be ashamed of. Got some work to do to catch Bama. It's certainly going to be motivating for the guys coming back. And, I mean, if you get a chance to play a program like Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl, how often do we get to play Oklahoma? I mean, that's going to be a fun matchup too. So if we get a fun matchup like that, I'm glad it's not like another, no disrespect to Virginia, but that wasn't like the most fun bowl game after a good season last year. You want to beat up a name brand program. And if we get a shot at like in Oklahoma, that'd be a fun matchup right there. Probably another 52-46 game, but hey, you might look at this game when it's all said and done and say, this was the best anybody played Alabama this year. You might look at that. And obviously it doesn't matter. We lost. We're not playing for like moral victories here, but this Alabama team loaded, especially on the offensive side of the ball. We saw those weapons at hand tonight, and they got a little bit more going for them on the defensive side of the ball, and that's where we need to make some strides next year.
Yeah, well, we'll see. It looks like Florida probably has lost to 2 teams that made the playoffs. I'm assuming that A&M is going to get in now that Notre Dame got absolutely slaughtered. So, out of the 3 losses, obviously the LSU one's inexcusable, but a 3-point loss to the team that's going to be ranked 4th and a 6-point loss to the team that's going to be ranked 1st. Still one more game to go. Like you said, it looks like it's going to be the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma, but whatever bowl it is, I mean, hey, from where we came in August to where we thought there might not be any college football to where we are now, night and day. And it's been a fun ride.
Amazing job by the SEC too, kind of setting the tone for that too. And that's what, like, I almost want to see Ohio State. Fine, you're undefeated, you can get in the playoff, but I almost want to see them say, we're going to put you 4th, enjoy Bama in the first round, and slide A&M up to 3 to play Clemson. But plus, I don't want to see A&M play Alabama in the first round. What do you think about that?
Oh, well, I think they ought to punish Ohio State for playing 6 games. You know me, I hate the Buckeyes. Like I know you're a homer and you like the Buckeyes, but
you got a soft spot for Ohio State.
Well, you can't help how you grow up, Nick. You can't help how you grow up. But,
it's in the blood.
Hey, I like that idea. That's creative. Let's make it Alabama, Ohio State the first round, and show Ryan Day what it's like to play SEC football.
Yeah, let's see that tomorrow.
All right, so that's Nick Knudsen. You can find Nick on Twitter at Nick Knudsen FB, writing at Read and Reaction, or at his website, AmericanFootballStories.com. My name's Will Miles. You can find me on Twitter at WillMilesSEC or at my website, ReadandReaction.com. Remember to like and subscribe on YouTube. Press that little bell button. That really helps us out. And until the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma, go Gators.
Go Gators.
If you like these videos, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Or you can follow me at WillMilesSEC on Twitter or at Facebook.com/ReadandReaction. Until next time, be a smarter fan.